watch later. And everyone on this call, as well as those that registered but couldn't attend, will get a copy of this. And like I said, we'll just keep admitting it people as they come in. So welcome everybody. We're going to start off just quickly introducing ourselves. So Yaz and myself, my name's Oliver. I am a co-creator with Yasmin of the Funeral Fix, and now recently introduced the Funeral Fix Express. I'm based in Sydney. I'm a funeral celebrant and a funeral director, and also a marriage celebrant. But today, mainly what we'll be talking about will be around boundary setting, particularly within the funeral industry and the work that we do within that. Yes.
Hi everyone, it's so nice to have you all here and connect, even if it is virtually. I'm Yaz I'm the co-creator, as Ollie said, of the Funeral Fix with him, as well as the Earn Collective. I'm also a funeral celebrant and funeral director of my own company called Rite of Passage Funerals, based up here on the Gold Coast. And yeah, I know personally for me, boundaries, Ollie has almost been a mentor with me for boundaries. And I've learned so much, and we've found through developing the course how important boundaries are, and this importance of self-care is a huge part of the Funeral Fix course, but also for us personally, it's something that we put into practice every day. And when we had our in-person event at the Funeral Fix in Sydney, Funeral Fix Express, we really found that this boundary model and the kind of worksheet and work, what's it called? Like, what did we do? All the activity essentially was so amazing. Like everyone was so engaged, and what we got back from it was incredible. So we thought we would do like a little mini version of that here, where we talk through the importance of boundaries, so that we can kind of make more of an impact with all of you.
So before we get into that, just a little bit of background for those that aren't aware of what the Funeral Fix is. The Funeral Fix was created by Yaz and myself about 18 months ago now, to help train both current celebrants and obviously newcomers into the space to be able to be the best and most inspiring funeral celebrants they can be. So we cover over 8 modules, basically everything that you need to know to get up and running and become an incredible funeral celebrant. The Funeral Fix Express came about mainly because there were some people that we were getting some feedback from that they loved the course and the content, but they missed that in-person training and connection. So we created the Funeral Fix Express, and we had our first one in Sydney just a few weeks ago. And that was amazing. And we've got another event planned for Melbourne next time. And it's not until June, so it is a little far away, but we do have a little gift available at the end of today for those that are on the course, for those that might be considering joining the course and even joining us in person, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later.
Yes, so welcome. I know some of you are brand new here. I can see some of our students. Hi, Narelle. I can see a whole beautiful mix of you here. And I just want to kind of set the intention really early on that boundaries, as I said before, are a little bit of a hot topic. So it can be quite triggering when you're hearing things that possibly you're a little bit uncomfortable with. And I just want to make it really clear that our intention today is to help you reframe your mindset around how you can protect your time, your emotional, mental, and physical health, so that you can really thrive in this business and keep making a really big impact. And from our own practice in terms of boundaries and self-care, we've really found that a little bit of discomfort now can make a really big difference in the future. Your kind of future self thanks you so much. And I know personally, when I started my journey with boundaries has been really one that's only kind of come about in the last few years. I am a self-described people pleaser from way back. And it wasn't until I really started exploring boundaries, especially being in this work as a funeral celebrant and funeral director, and the importance of them, not just for myself, but also for my clients, and how coming from a really professional place. And of course, you know, we all get into this business because we're compassionate, kind, caring people, but sometimes that can mean giving so much of ourselves that there's nothing left. And that not only detrimental to us, but it can also be to our clients as well. So if there's times today where we're hoping that you will grow from this session, it's our job to we really want to push you and help you grow just as we're doing that with ourselves. But just be open to everything that you hear, and hopefully we all together can learn a little bit more from each other today.
So we'll talk about what boundaries are, but before we do that, I just wanted to sort of cover some of the things that you might resonate with that make you feel like perhaps boundaries are particularly an issue for you, or something that maybe needs to be worked on. That is, sometimes you might feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you might feel resentment toward people asking you for help. You might avoid phone calls and interactions with people that you think might ask something in return. You feel burnt out, and we'll talk a little bit about what burnout looks like and feels like. You frequently daydream about dropping everything and just disappearing. And also you feel like you have no time for yourself. So if any of that sort of resonated with anybody, there are potential opportunities there to perhaps set some boundaries. So what is a boundary? Let's go into that. So boundaries, particularly professional boundaries, are limits that protect the space between, in our instance, a funeral celebrant's professional power and a client or a family's vulnerability. So boundaries are the gateway to healthy relationships, and they play a major role in self-care, which is something, self-care is one particular topic that we talk a lot about in the Funeral Fix course, and we are very passionate about. Boundaries are a safeguard to overextending yourself. They are a self-care practice. They define roles in relationships between you and your clients or your families. They communicate what is considered acceptable and not acceptable behaviors in the relationships that you might be forming with your clients. They are parameters for knowing what to expect from each other. They are a way to communicate your expectations to others. They're a way to create healthy professional relationships, and they are a way to create clarity. They are also a way to ensure that you remain sustainable in this work to impact as many families as possible, so that we can continue going on and not getting burnt out.
Yeah, so as you can see, boundaries are really, really important. But essentially, as funeral celebrants, the lines can get blurred quite easily. And I think that's comes first and foremost to the fact that we work in a very emotional environment. So what is it exactly that a funeral celebrant do? So many of you here today are already funeral celebrants. Some may be marriage celebrants who want to work in this space. Some might be completely new. But essentially, a funeral celebrant writes and delivers the ceremony at a funeral. But for those of us in the industry already, we know that we do so much more than that. Before we even get to the point of writing and delivering the ceremony, we have to be really comfortable with holding space for the family in grief, knowing how to ask specific questions to get the most out of your time with your clients. You need to be able to gently and artfully know how to set firm boundaries, which is why we're here today. You need to be confident enough to manage robust family dynamics, because we all know that that definitely comes up, especially when there's a funeral to plan. You need to be able to honor and acknowledge that a death has taken place. And that really comes down to being comfortable with mortality yourself. And you need to be able to look after your own emotional and mental and spiritual and physical health as well, in order to make the biggest impact and be the best funeral celebrant you can be. So how is it that these lines kind of get blurred? Well, I think, as I said before, it is because it's a really emotionally charged role. So often in that first kind of meeting, you walk into a room full of grieving people and they look to you for support. Now, of course, we are going to be providing as much comfort and compassion as support as possible. And setting boundaries isn't about compromising that. It's about knowing exactly what your role is and what your scope of work is, what you're personally comfortable with, and setting parameters around that. And then kind of helping those people or those clients who do want to overstep those boundaries to find the proper resources that they need to get the help that they deserve and require. So all formal relationships need rapport and trust to function well. And in this instance, it is a professional relationship, of course. Obviously, each situation is different. Sometimes you might be helping friends plan a funeral for their person, but generally speaking, you will still be in that situation as a professional. So you want to make your clients feel seen and heard and at ease, and that you are organized and that you are steering the ship and guiding them towards having the best funeral ceremony possible. But equally, it's important that the lines don't get blurred. This essentially comes down to crystal clear communication from the beginning. And that is just so important, that you set the expectations early on with your clients of what you are willing, able, and capable of doing. And anything outside of that, you're able to help them find the resources that they need to get the help that they want. So often for a funeral celebrant, this might come down to emotional support. How many of you have gone into a meeting or built rapport with your clients, but then they start to require more emotional support than perhaps you're willing to take on? It may also look like being available 24/7. And when you're managing multiple clients at once, that can be really hard and stressful. So I was going to run through some specific examples of what these overstep boundaries might look like so that you can identify them moving forward.
So some of these might sound a bit familiar. I know that they certainly resonated with me when we were sort of working out examples. But some examples of overstepped boundaries from clients might include a client calling or texting you multiple times a day at all hours, expecting you to become available or to be available 24/7 for non-urgent matters in particular. Unrealistic expectations, asking you to do things outside your personal ethics scope or values. For example, perform a prayer or a ritual that you may not necessarily be comfortable with. Expecting you to become involved in intricate family dynamics. For example, putting you in the middle of their issues as a scapegoat. And we've heard firsthand of situations like that where families have kind of taken the liberty of using the celebrant to kind of avoid their own personal issues and using the celebrant to help them get out of that. And I think that that's just a really dangerous place for a celebrant to be. And especially for a family to expect that of us in our role. Not adhering to your deadlines, for example, sending music, sending eulogies, sending photographs if you're putting a slideshow together or something like that, but just not adhering to those deadlines, which can obviously cause a lot of stress if you don't have those particular boundaries set up. But there is the other side of that as well. So some examples of boundaries overstepped by us as celebrants, funeral celebrants, could involve becoming overly involved or attached to a client, inserting yourself in family dynamics, or trying to fix things that are certainly outside of our control or our scope of support, being emotionally entangled with their grief or their current mental state, showing fluid work-home boundaries, example being on call 24/7, or considering the client to be a friend or allowing the client to have that view.
So I just want to say like a quick, I know most of you are muted, but I would just love to see if any or some of those kind of resonated with you. If your camera's on, you can put your hand up, but I think it's so common for us as celebrants to kind of have those moments where, and it's really easy. Yes, yeah, it's so true. It definitely impacts all of us. And the thing is, we don't really have to do anything about them if we don't want to. You can continue to have your boundaries overstepped or overstep boundaries yourself. However, there are consequences. Like with anything, if you choose to ignore it, there's going to be consequences. So what is the harm or potential impact on you of having these boundary crossings? Well, it can potentially damage your relationship with your client, be it if you feel resentful and some of that subconsciously gets passed on to them or consciously, or their expectations of you aren't met because you're not able to meet them and they haven't been communicated properly. It can also cause potential harm to other clients. If you have multiple clients on the go and one family in particular is continuously overstepping those boundaries and you're allowing that to happen, well, how is that going to impact your other clients that you're helping at the same time? It can also sometimes put your colleagues in difficult situations and cause unintentional risk to yourself and your business or your employer if you're employed. But I think outside, while these are all so important on a personal level, which I think is possibly the most important, having your boundaries consistently kind of broken down and not that infrastructure of safety around you can also affect you personally. Without clear boundaries, you are much more susceptible to burnout, compassion fatigue, moral distress, maybe even experience negative mental health issues. So it's really, really important to kind of create this infrastructure of boundaries around you from a loving, compassionate, kind place, but feeling strong enough in yourself to learn how to say no. And I know for me personally, and I think for so many of us in our generation, we really weren't raised, I'm like from personal experience, to say no very much. It can feel really uncomfortable at the beginning to say no to someone. There's like worry that you're going to upset them. There's fear around their reaction. There's so many different reasons that we can feel uncomfortable saying no. But when you do start to kind of gently enforce and set up these boundaries, you can really protect yourself and again, just make you impact your community and your work even more. And essentially, it is a self-care practice. So this is the most valuable self-care practice that you can put into place for yourself as a funeral celebrant that we believe. Because I think it's the self-care practice that so many of us perhaps aren't as knowledgeable about, or not as, it's a little bit harder than taking a meditation or going for a swim in the ocean. Setting boundaries can be more challenging, but it definitely is so useful. So Ollie, I think speaking of burnout, why don't you talk through exactly kind of what burnout is? Because I know that happens a lot in our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some ways to recognize what ways that burnout can be caused, and that involves not knowing when to say no, for example, or not knowing how to say no, prioritizing others over yourself, people pleasing, the superhero syndrome, or I can do it all, unrealistic expectations, and also not being appreciated for what you do. In all relationships, I think we set limits, whether it be personal or professional, and it's really important to be able to recognize when we may be crossing that invisible line. The line is what separates the client from us and helps define that relationship. So this is me and my role and what my capacity or what my scope of support involves, and this is you and what your responsibilities and obligations are. And ensuring that that line is really quite clearly defined, and throughout the relationship as well, throughout your working relationship with a client, ensuring that you're adhering to that as well and sticking to it, unless, particularly when it comes to grief and support and offering anything that goes beyond your training and your skill level, it's a really, really dangerous place to start getting involved in that. If you're not a trained professional and you're not being invited to be that role, or you're not being contracted to be that role, for example, you should never take on the role of a counselor or a grief supporter. The best thing you can do when you are finding yourself in a situation where clients are feeling like you are becoming that person is to guide them to the people that are the professionals with the skills and the adequate training to take that on. Otherwise, you're doing two really damaging things potentially. You're getting yourself emotionally tied, which is not ideal for us. And also you're not necessarily meeting their needs adequately. So by giving them your advice or your opinion, it may not be coming from as well-intentioned as it may be, well-intended as it may be. If it's not coming from a place of skill and training and knowledge, you can really be doing potentially them a disservice.
So how do you manage boundaries? What is the solution moving forward? And I guess the key is really understanding the difference between personal and a professional relationship. So a professional relationships are time bound. They have a distinct role and purpose and have some structure. So essentially, you are being employed as a funeral celebrant to write and deliver a funeral ceremony and all that goes with that, of course, for a specific period of time. That is essentially what that professional relationship looks like. You are not being asked to be a grief counselor. You're not being asked to do other things that are outside that scope of work, unless, of course, you are a grief counselor as well, and you can provide that support, or you have things within your skill set. It will be all independent based on each of your individual skills and requirements. But essentially, just looking at what a funeral celebrant's role is, that is the professional structure of this relationship. And you have a professional responsibility for the welfare of your client. So there should be rules and boundaries set around that relationship. The thing is, once you have allowed that relationship to veer more into friendship zone, although your friendship should absolutely have boundaries, as in any relationship in your life, but once those professional boundaries have been relaxed, I guess, it can be hard to bring them back, which is why starting from the very beginning, your client needs crystal clear communication, that you are there to guide them through the funeral service from beginning to end, what that looks like and what their requirements are and what your requirements are. So it's really early to establish that. It's really important to establish that as early as possible. Definitely in that first meeting, if not before then. So you can kindly and gently offer some advice on what your role is, where it begins, and possibly most important of all, where it ends. So where does that professional relationship end, so that they know? Because a lot of the time clients just don't know. So many times they've never even had to plan a funeral before. They don't really know what the funeral celebrant's role is. So it's more the fact that by not communicating that to them, they just simply don't know where that relationship ends. And so they will come to you for advice, especially if you have built that rapport, which is so important. So setting up those expectations early is really important. And as I said, it is very individual. So you can kind of ask yourself some questions around this so that you can figure out where your boundaries lie. Do you have limitations around when your clients can contact you? So perhaps you don't mind being contacted 24/7 and you have the capability to do that. But really tune in and trust and listen to yourself. Okay, I only want to be available to my clients on these days and these times. And you'll know those clients that kind of they will message you and you'll be like, I can't get to this right now, but I feel a sense of duty that I have to reply to them right now. Or they're calling you on a Sunday afternoon and you do answer the phone because you feel like you have to, even though you don't want to. That's how you can kind of start to learn where your boundary lies. Do you have a time frame for responses? Do you like responding straight away? Is that something that you're physically able and willing to do? Or is it easier to say to your clients and fairer to your clients to say, feel free to contact me on these days between these hours. I'll try and get back to you within kind of 1 to 3 hours. And so you're kind of setting up that expectation that there might be a time delay and that's totally okay. So really analyze what you're prepared to do and be for them and let them know what those are early on so that you can create that infrastructure and boundaries around you. Because while grief is tricky, oftentimes the family will simply not know what level of access they have to you. So it's your job and your responsibility to communicate that to them.
And each person on that note will have, or each one of us will have their own set of boundaries that will need to be implemented. And that's going to be based on your comfort level and your skill set. But ultimately, the ultimate goal is to ensure that we can impact as many families as possible and still sustain our own self, our own mental capacity, and our own business as well. And it's important to prevent, recognize, and manage boundary crossings. But just to take a bit of a rigid approach now with some specific examples of maybe how we can set boundaries. And even as Yaz mentioned, like at the first meeting with your family, perhaps, or your client, even just setting a time frame for how long that meeting will go, and setting up verbally what your sort of timeframes are in terms of when they can access you or contact you for anything that's not an emergency. So for example, I generally would say something along the lines of, during the course of the next hour, so I'm letting them know that this meeting might go for about an hour, I would like to understand more about how I can assist with the ceremony creation. So I'm defining why I am there. After this meeting, I'm generally available from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, via phone or email. So I'm letting them know my times and how they can contact me. But I might add as well, do you prefer to communicate via text, email, or phone? And what times best suit you usually? That the other thing in terms of keeping the channels strong, if you only want to liaise with one person from that family, which is often the most preferred option. So you're getting one source of information and not coming from 5 different people, which can get very confusing and very out of hand very quickly. So I might say something along the lines of, in order to keep the communication channels strong, I'll keep in contact with you over the course of the planning so you can liaise with your family, so you remain my one point of contact. Especially if you start to see that things are coming from different people, it's a good idea to maybe even just reiterate that even throughout the process. Another example, when it comes to setting deadlines and what you might need from your families, could be, in order for us to have everything ready for the funeral director, I have emailed you a list of everything I require from you with due dates. Please ensure everything is ready on time, and if you're having trouble, please let me know as soon as possible. So you're being really clear with what dates you will need things by. And if they're having any trouble, you are still giving them access to reach out. So obviously still being that support, but at the same point in time, you are saying that these things need to happen for logistically for things to be there on time and to be completed. Then we added another example about when things aren't being delivered to you on time, when you might need to start to say, well, if I don't have this, then the consequence of us not having this in time will mean that we might not be able to have that in the ceremony. So an example of that might be, at this point in time, it's not looking like the slideshow, for example, will be ready. If you don't feel it will be finished by today, we'll have to remove that from the ceremony. So you're giving the responsibility back to that client. And I know that that might sound harsh for a lot of people, but otherwise you're going to just be really frustrated within yourself. And it's going to, again, put some, potentially cause a bit of resentment towards that client. And that's certainly not what we want to try and achieve here. Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes, despite our best efforts, clients do kind of continuously cross those boundaries. So we've put together a few. You will also get a recording of this, and I can pop them in the email as well, because they are really handy, just examples to have in terms of when people do cross those boundaries and you respectfully kind of need to reinforce them. So some examples that we've put together are, if someone comes to you, and particularly probably around more of the grief counseling and that additional support that we may not be trained for, something that Ollie and I both kind of say to our clients quite regularly is, though that specific request falls outside my scope of support and expertise as a funeral celebrant, I can provide details of someone who's more qualified to offer advice on that. So it's gently letting them know that you're not that person, but you're absolutely willing and able to help them find the resources that they need and that they deserve to get the help that they need. Another similar example is if there's, again, kind of relying on you for that emotional support outside of what you're willing and able to kind of give to them. I'm so sorry to hear that. Do you have someone you can speak to at this time? This is a good one because it's letting them know that you're unfortunately not that person. You're not that sounding board in this instance. So do they have someone else that they can speak to? And they instantly are like, oh, okay. And again, it's just very gently and compassionately reestablishing these boundaries so that you can protect your working relationship with them.
Yeah.
Again, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're at capacity, an example could be, though I'm honored you have asked me, I'm not able to take this on at this stage, but can recommend someone else who's able to help. So again, with all of these examples, it's very directly letting them know, but with compassion and love, letting them know that it's a no, but you're also there to help them. If, of course, you are able to help them find the resources they need. That's not going to be applicable in every situation and scenario, but if possible, we can absolutely guide them towards something that someone or something that can help them get what they need. Again, if you are having if it's just too much work at the moment and you can't take on that job, I know so often we kind of want to help everyone, but unfortunately it's not always an option. Saying something like, I'm working at my capacity at the moment, and though I would love to help, I won't be the best person to assist you with this right now. Again, it's just really reestablishing the boundary and letting them know that while you would love to, you can't. So there's two kinds of approaches there. Again, you will get some of these scripts and this will be recorded, but find that having these things on hand for when you are taken kind of aback or you don't quite know what to say in the moment, and it can be hard to say no, especially if you're just kind of starting your relationship with boundary setting, they can be really helpful in just reestablishing those boundaries in a kind and compassionate way.
Absolutely. So we will jump into some questions in a couple of minutes. So if you do have any, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we can address them, or you can just put your virtual hand up on Zoom and we can spotlight you to be able to ask the question, or even share an experience. I know that Catherine has an experience about being used as a scapegoat, so we can talk about that, Catherine, if you're comfortable, in a couple of minutes. But any other examples, I guess, that you'd like to share about how your boundaries have been tested, or what you have done personally and professionally to incorporate or implement some boundaries in your life, and how that has really benefited you. So before we get into the Q&A, something really exciting, as we mentioned, we do have a gift for everybody here. Now, I understand this may not be for everybody, but for those that are on the fence about joining the Funeral Fix or joining the Funeral Fix Express in particular, the next one is going to be in Melbourne on the 5th of June, which may or may not coincide with a very large event that's taking place down there. I don't know, just assuming. But nonetheless, it's going to be an amazing day. The one that we had in Sydney was a full day, and it is called Express because it is a lot of information that we jam pack into one day. But we certainly don't cover every single element of the course. So as soon as you sign up to the Funeral Fix Express, you get immediate access to the Funeral Fix online for you to become as familiar as possible with the content. And most of what we do on the day are activities specific for in-person. So we've tried to really capitalize on the fact that we are in person. So a lot of activities, a lot of exercises. You will be challenged, most certainly. You will be taken out of your comfort zone, but you will come out of that particular day and of doing the online course as well, a much more well-rounded celebrant. And essentially, we've created the course and we've created these sessions really because we just want to make the biggest impact that we can on as many people as possible. We get impacted ourselves by seeing you show up and by your input and your interaction as well. But essentially, the ultimate goal is to impact as many families as we can and to really amplify funeral ceremonies or any end of life events that we can. So that's why we're here. So the gift that we have for anyone who's keen to join the Funeral Fix Express Melbourne on the 5th of June, 2023 is 10% off for the next 24 hours. So at 11 a.m. tomorrow, this will shut out, and we're giving 10% off for anyone that uses the code boundaries. And we will put this in an email. And so just so you have an idea of how good of a deal this is, the course itself online is $1,200. The early bird special is $1,350. If you take 10% off that, it would be $1,215. So essentially you're getting everything that the online course has, plus the in-person benefits for just $15. No steak knives thrown in. You're going to have an excellent day. So for those that could join us in Melbourne, you are so welcome, and we'd love to have you there. And just to remember that you do get access to the online course immediately upon signing up. So I'll post the information for accessing those tickets in the chat, and it'll be in the email that we'll send after this as well, which will include the recording. Yes.
Yeah, so I think we can kick off some Q&A. Thank you all. That was lovely. we've gone through a lot of stuff today. So we'd love to hear from you guys, questions, examples of where you felt like boundaries were kind of being overstepped and what you may or may not have done about it. Any kind of personal anecdotes, questions, it's now over to you guys. So please don't be shy. Here we go. Catherine, can you spotlight
Yeah, Catherine, are you comfortable sharing?
Sure am.
Great. I think I can. Okay, we'll go Catherine Stiles first, and then we'll go Catherine Kennedy, if you're comfortable, Catherine.
Sure.
Hi.
I dealt with two family members that were squabbling over the deceased's estate and business. One of them hired me to do the graveside and write the eulogy and deliver it. Once that was finished and completed, I had the second party come to me asking for a hard copy that they can use at a second funeral in front of their friends and family. And I said, look, I'm happy to rewrite it and come and deliver it at that service and contractually obligate myself to you. That's not a problem. And they said, well, it's already written. You've already done the work. The other party's already paid you. This is our mother. You owe that to us. And I said, well, that's not how it works. I'm happy for my client, party one, to give you a copy of the eulogy for you to read. But if they don't want to, then you'll have to come to me and pay for that service again. And they were not happy, and they were very abusive. And I actually told the other party that this request was given to me, and they said, under no circumstances are you to give that information to them for free. Absolutely not. And they put me in this really weird back and forth situation, and it was absolutely horrid. Not to mention, this was my first funeral.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Fire. I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's a lot. Has anyone got some input, similar situations? I think that the key takeaway here is that you actually stood your ground, which is amazing. And I think it's really hard to be put in a situation like that. And what they were asking for was absolutely unacceptable. So you were firm enough in your boundaries to stand your ground. So good on you for that.
Joanna Lincoln, do you have anything to offer on that? I see you nodding your head.
It was super scary because the deceased was a huge member of society. And party two that became abusive, also a very big person within the community, and it would be really easy for them to absolutely shatter my business and give me really bad credit.
Yeah.
So I was very scared, very upset. It's just little old me against the world sort of thing.
Oh, wow. That's a lot, especially for your first funeral.
So how did you handle it, Catherine? What was the end result?
I said, look, if Marilyn won't give you a copy of the eulogy, please let me know, and I'm happy to rewrite one for you at X expense and deliver it to you by the time that you need it. And they just basically sent me an abusive email saying, just don't worry about it, forget about it. And I left it at that.
It's important for us as well when we are asserting our boundaries. I've learned this as a mother. This has been, the kids have been my biggest teachers, in that when you do assert a boundary, you have to also, you can't control how someone's going to respond to that boundary. And it's so liberating to detach yourself from the outcome. You stand firm in your belief, and how someone responds to that. People don't often, when they don't have boundaries themselves, they don't want you to assert boundaries. It's very triggering for them. If you say no, or, you know, even if their request is completely out of line, how they respond to that is sometimes you are met with contention. But when you release the expectation of like I can't control how someone responds, but this is me and I'm firm in my boundary, then it kind of takes away, it diffuses your own fear of setting that boundary. And that can be some really helpful advice as well. So, but good on you for staying strong.
So we do only have 5 minutes left, and I do know that Catherine Kennedy has put a question in. Catherine, are you happy if I spotlight you and you ask that question?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Now, I had a lady who was basically arranging the funeral by herself. Her sons were not involved. Family dynamics were very bit complicated. And when I went to have the first meeting with her, she was a lovely lady, but she was, like I said in my text there, really bad at communicating. And she would say something and she would go around and around and around. And then we'd move on to something else. And then she'd go back to the next thing, around and around and around. Now, she was dealing with grief. Her husband had long-term cancer and had passed away. And he was a well-respected specialist in the area. And he was the rock of their family. So she had so much to take on. Plus, her sons were not communicating with her. Again, complicated family dynamics. And I was there for a long time. And then I got a phone call from her down the track during the week in preparing the service. And again, she called me and I couldn't get her off the phone. How do we deal with these people? And like I said in my text, without disrespecting that they are going through an awful time in their life. And she was dealing with this massive, huge funeral by herself, and her sons had no input apart from what they gave to the funeral directors. So how do you sort of, you're looking at, you've been there a long time and you're looking at your watch, and how do you cut someone off or try to wrap it up when you know you've got more information to get out of them, and they just keep going around and around and around, and really
I think, Catherine, for me, like sort of what I touched on at the very beginning, I let them know sort of how long I've got to spend there. Setting that time up front is really, really important, because they go, oh, I've only got an hour with this person. And if you let them know everything that you're trying to achieve in that time and everything you need from them, it can help just at the beginning them understand, okay, Catherine's here for an hour to get this information from me. And when you've, it's really difficult, obviously, and each person is experiencing grief in different ways, and they go down memory lane, of course, and there's lots of things going on. But to just try and keep it on track with what your questions might be as much as possible. So you could use little statements like, oh, that certainly brings up a lot of memory. Let's talk about this particular thing, and maybe just try and shift the topic a little bit and move it away. Or say something like, oh, I'd love to stay here and talk all day, but I really need to get some information out of you that's going to, directly relate to what I'm trying to do. So let's just get back on track here, or something like that. Or if you feel that it's going to be more beneficial for her, you could use the line of, it sounds like you're going through a lot at the moment. I'm not a trained professional or a trained counsellor, but I do know that Griefline offers excellent free support. Do you have their number? Or something like that, that you're actually acknowledging that there's something going on. You're aligning with her issues, and that's really important. But yeah, then you're actually giving her somewhere to go, and you're saying, look, I'm not the best person for this, but here's the gift of giving you direction on where you are probably best to go to get that support.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
I also send through my funeral questions in advance before the meetings, just to set them up so they know what we're going to be running through. They have a little bit of time to prepare for that in advance. And I say, you don't have to answer them straight away, but this is just so that you understand what we're going to be covering and the things that I will be asking you. So they have a little bit of time to contemplate those questions and think about those questions before you even get there. Then, as Ollie said, set up that time frame. Your time, you might be happy with 2-hour blocks. It just depends. And say, we've got 2 hours today. And then if you do find her on the call a lot and And then that's a great place to say, have you got someone else? This is a huge funeral for you to plan on your own. Who can help you with this? Who else is giving you support in order to get all of this done? Because it's too much. It seems like it's too much for you. And so that you can kind of help them find those resources. And is there a friend that you can reach out to that can help you with these logistical things? So that you can just gently reassert those boundaries as you go.
Yeah, I think it'll just take more practice to when I encounter families like this. It's not often I've had that happen, but oh wow, it really did drain me. It really did. Oh, look, it all went off beautifully. It was a beautiful service, but it was as you talk about the boundaries, and they do take your energy. Some of these funerals really take a lot of energy, and that one did. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
I think thanks, Catherine. I think today has definitely resonated with a lot of people. Everybody's interaction and input has been so much appreciated. Thank you for being here. We will send a recording for anyone who wants to go back or anyone that wasn't able to jump online. And obviously we'll have the link to access the Funeral Fix Express with your little gift as well, if you're keen to join us. But thank you so much. In the interest of boundaries, we are going to try and keep to 10:45 or 10:46. But thank you all so much. And we will see you in future Zoom meetings like this, hopefully.
Yeah, we plan on doing them quite often. So it's so nice to connect with you all. Thank you for sharing and for joining us.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.